Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. I have Jeff Nicholson, an attorney who practices with me, and we're going to talk about all those commercials you see on TV that talk about the asbestos-related cancers and that you need to hire an attorney. We're going to talk to you about the cancers that you can get, the symptoms, the treatments, and if you do have the cancer, what you need to do. So join me on the next Legal Lines with Jeff Nicholson.
Want to learn the secret to big savings on TV, internet, and phone? It's bundling your services with Cox. When you bundle with Cox, you get digital cable, high-speed internet with Power Boost, and telephone, all for one low monthly price. That's 3 fantastic services at one low price that will make you smile. The secret is out. The more you bundle, the more you save. So get a whole lot and save a whole lot when you bundle with Cox.
Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. I'm pleased to have on the show today Jeff Nicholson. He's an attorney, practices with me. We're going to talk about those commercials you see all the time talking about asbestos litigation and mesothelioma. Jeff,
hey, good to see you.
Thanks for being on the show. I know we've all seen those commercials, and tell the folks what the commercial's about. Typically, it's saying we're going to represent you for exposure to asbestos. You probably have cancer. Let us help you.
Right. The reason that they're so prevalent in our state is that we have a huge petrochemical industry here, and the petrochemical industry used a ton of asbestos over the years. Starting around the turn of the century through the late 70s, thousands of tons of asbestos was used in the plant setting to insulate things, to keep in heat in the processes, and to generally help out with the processes in chemical plants.
And the bottom line is, I think we have, at least in the past, the second largest chemical plant in the world out at Exxon, and then you've got all the other plants. So you got a lot of folks over the last 40, 50 years that either worked with or were exposed to the asbestos products that were used in those plants.
Right, and the thing about exposure to asbestos is that it doesn't hurt you immediately.
You don't even know you've inhaled it, probably.
Yeah. The day that you inhale it isn't the day you get sick, it's years later. And we have been seeing over the past 20 or so years the effects of those people who were exposed in the 40s and 50s.
So when we say years later, we mean 20 or 30 years later.
Right. A mesothelioma case, the cancer, the most heinous cancer that we're talking about, can pop up 40, 50 years after exposure. So it's something that takes a long time to develop, and certainly doesn't happen when you're exposed that day.
All right, so let's kind of take this step by step. So someone who's likely a victim of this disease will have worked in a chemical plant and been working with either the piping insulation or some type of insulation or product that had the asbestos in it. It could even be ceiling tiles. I know I went to Lee High School and I loved my big dome theater, and they tore it down because it had ceiling tiles with asbestos in it. Right. So it's not limited to just the chemical plants. We're talking about there were all kinds of products that had the asbestos in it.
Right, in the past 10 or 15 years, the number of people who were exposed in plant settings and got sick has sort of been sloping down, and now we're seeing those people who have been exposed in home settings being a larger percentage of the people who get sick. People who did home jobs in the 70s with different products like the ceiling tiles, the floor tiles, joint compound, things like that, sheetrock mug, all those types of things are getting sick at this point. The rise in mesotheliomas goes up to about 2012. That's when we expect the number of cases to peak. And then after that, it'll slope off. But there's a larger percentage of people these days who were exposed in home settings, who were exposed to parents who worked in plants and were younger.
Explain that. How does that happen?
I've represented a whole bunch of people whose parents worked in plants, and when they came home in their overalls from the plant, had asbestos caked all over them. Dust. And of course, the first thing you do when you get home is go hug your child, sit your child on your lap to ask them how the school day went. And just by the act of sitting, the dust puffs up in the air and you breathe it in. If you do that every day for an extended period of time, the likelihood of getting a cancer goes up.
Well,
So-
let's talk about how folks, in fact, get that dangerous product into their bodies. Is it strictly through inhalation?
Absolutely.
Meaning they breathe it in.
Yeah, absolutely. The asbestos fibers that cause the damage are microscopic. You can't see them. It's tiny particles that actually work their way down into the lung and cause damage. So the main way of getting one of these diseases is having breathed it in.
So we're ruling out you cannot contract these asbestos type cancers and diseases by touching the stuff.
Correct. So we'll take the example of the floor tile. If you just touch a floor tile, that doesn't get you sick. The asbestos is encased inside the tile, and just touching it, you're not going to get sick. It's the act of breaking it, grinding it, crushing it that releases the particles into the air.
God, you know what I'm
causes
thinking
the
of?
sickness.
I have an electric sander when I was a kid, sanding the sides of asbestos shingling houses to get paint off.
And that's a huge
I'm just
exposure.
really thrilled about that.
That's a huge exposure.
Wow. All right. Well, so bottom line is you breathe it in. Tell the folks what the symptoms are. First of all, we said it could take 20, 30, 40 years. Describe the symptoms.
The symptoms range from breathing problems, difficulty breathing, chest pains, coughing, and we're talking about a sort of complex of diseases. One of the diseases that you can contract is asbestosis. That's a scarring of the lung tissue that prevents you from being able to breathe properly and leads to use of oxygen and things like that.
Is it the scarring of the interstitium or the air sacs themselves? And so it prevents the ability for the lungs to expand to allow air to come in and to expel it.
Correct. When your lung gets scarred up, it can't expand like it needs to, and so you're not able to bring in the oxygen that you usually.
So you're
can
short
bring
of
in.
breath.
Short
you
of
get
breath.
dizzy, all the stuff that you would associate if you run your hiney off, and all of a sudden you can't breathe well.
And that disease usually is something that's related to heavy exposures. Those guys that are in the plants for years, covering off pipe in a cloud of dust all day long. The lung cancer and mesothelioma, the cancers that you expect to see from this exposure, are something that can result from a small exposure.
And what are we talking about? A day, 10 times exposure?
The science says that a day to several days of exposure is all it takes. Small amount of fiber in your lung can turn into a cancer years later.
And every individual is unique, so what might not hurt somebody is going to hurt someone else.
Absolutely. So what you see with the cancers usually is you present with a cough, chest pain. With mesothelioma, it's a cancer of the lining around the lung, so you feel a stabbing pain in your chest and your lungs aren't able to contract because this cancer is on your lung, the tumor. With mesothelioma, there's another type of cancer that works on the lining of your stomach and can cause stomach pains, bowel problems, things like that. So,
and it's because the fibers indwelt themselves in those linings.
Correct.
Cause irritation, and then the cancer develops.
Yeah, asbestos is a mineral. It's sort of a rock. So it's long filaments of rock. It's thin fibers, and it's such a wonder mineral because these things are so strong. It's also the reason they're so terrible to breathe in.
They don't biodegrade.
They don't go anywhere. They
there.
get down into your lung, they burrow through the lung tissue, and there's nowhere to go. A great deal of the fibers are big enough to be coughed up out of your system. The mucus linings pull those things out and you cough them up, but those microscopic ones are the ones that are terrible and get in there and do the damage.
So the diseases that develop from exposure to the asbestos, from what I understand, primarily about 4.
The asbestosis is something that like I said, presents itself with a cough and shortness of breath.
All right, we'll continue on the next segment with the other types. This is Locke Meredith, The Legal Lines, and Jeff Nicholson. We'll be right back.
Everybody loves On Demand from Cox. Well, did you know the love's about to grow? Soon, your on-demand menu will have a whole new look, making it easier than ever to find your favorite shows, access hundreds of movies, and thousands of free programming choices, even HD. Just like that, so you can watch what you want to watch, when you want to watch it. It just keeps growing better every day. See what's coming on demand and get more out of what you're into with Cox Digital Cable.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, pleased to have on the show Jeff Nicholson. We're talking about the asbestosis and other types of asbestos cancers and ailments you can develop. Jeff, we talked that there are 4 basic kinds. Tell the folks again what they are.
The kind we had left off talking about is asbestosis. That's a scarring of the lung tissue. With asbestosis, there's a range of illness. You can have some small difficulties with it, difficulty doing the things you normally do, walking, breathing.
It's going to manifest itself with shortness of breath.
Right. And it can lead up to being on oxygen 24/7, and even your lungs giving out and you passing away. The big treatment for it is a lung transplant. If your case is severe enough, you can go get a new lung, and that's pretty much the only way to handle that disease if it gets to that severity level.
Now, is the disease progressive?
It is progressive.
So even though you might have a 10% reduction in lung function in the beginning, it can continue to worsen to the point that basically you can't breathe and you require oxygen.
Right. Over the years, it progresses. It's not going to get better.
And no chemicals, no radiation, no chemotherapy. There's really nothing to do other than take that lung out.
I feel a little bit better. Lung transplant's the only known cure.
And that's not usually very successful, I wouldn't think.
And you have to qualify for it, and most people who can't breathe well don't qualify for the surgery.
All right, let's talk about
is prevalent in plant workers because they had a lot of exposure to asbestos, and a lot of people in the 50s, 60s, and 70s smoked as well. When you put those 2 factors together,
synergistic effect.
There's a synergistic effect. It's not as if you double your chances of getting a lung cancer. You multiply your chances greatly of getting lung cancer if you've been exposed to asbestos and smoked. It's a terrible thing. It's something that a lot of these companies knew about and didn't warn their workers, didn't say, if you're going to work around asbestos, you've got to quit smoking. They just, their workers get out there exposed to this toxic substance while they were smoking.
And we'll talk about ultimately try and use that as on the road, but what other presentations?
Shorten up the coughing, the chest pains.
And you literally have cells growing in your lungs and reducing the lungs' ability to function, which is to allow air to come in, mix with the blood, and then it be expelled.
Yeah, the malignancy can take up the entire lung cavity. The malignancy can cause the lung not to be able to expand like we talked about. Various things like that. So it's a terrible
kind of common
disease.
sense problems.
Right. You suffocate basically with lung cancer.
And the treatment for that is what?
Treatment for lung cancer is radiation, chemotherapy, those types of procedures. Also removal of the lung, removal of the tumor itself. Various things. In recent years, we've seen great successes in lung cancer. The doctors have come up with some treatments that really help people, and death sentence. Doctors are making great strides. People are having a success rate with.
So they'll come in, cut the cancer out, usually going to have to take some parts of the lung in that surgery, unfortunately. Treatment with radiation is what? Describe that process to folks. Ain't fun.
Yeah. What they do is they get a beam of radiation and target the tumor itself. Like I've said, the treatments for cancer have gotten really good, and these days they can focus that radiation right on the problem area and target that cancer and destroy it.
Basically trying to burn it.
Burn it out.
Burn it up.
Right. The other treatment, chemotherapy, is basically a poison. It's a poison you ingest into your system.
Typically they'll put an IV in you, a Metaport oftentimes, and they're literally pumping poison into your body.
So the deal is with chemotherapy, and poison those bad cells before they poison all the good cells, and it's a terrible
It's a balancing act because they are killing other white cells, the cells that help fight disease, but they're trying to kill the cancer cells first, and that causes great illness and
right.
pain.
Sometimes cure is as bad as the illness that you're going through.
All right. Longevity, if you contract lung cancer, is what? I know you said that they have success, but success is relative.
Right. If the cancer's too far gone, sometimes you survive for months. If the cancer is treatable, you can survive for years. So there's a wide range based on the type of cancer, whether it's a fast, real aggressive cancer, the treatments that they give you, can on, people live good lives after having this cancer as well.
The next disease,
mesothelioma,
which is typically what we're hearing on the commercials.
correct. Those are
Why are they pushing those commercials?
because two reasons. The only known cause in the United States of mesothelioma cancer is asbestos. There's no doubt that the person that presents with this to the doctor was exposed to asbestos at some point.
So it's easier to win that kind of case, and we'll talk about this on the next segment.
Right. The case is pretty much a slam dunk in terms of saying what caused this cancer. In terms of
got other hurdles to jump, but a big hurdle to jump you can do.
Yeah, in terms of the other reason why it's such a big case, because it's deadly, ends up killing the person that contracts it, and so the amount of money that you get for the person and the family never is enough because it can't replace that person.
And the symptoms that they present with meso?
Mesothelioma presents with, like we talked about, the lung type of mesothelioma that attacks the pleura around the lung.
Which is around the lung.
The little cellophane type lining that protects your lung from the rib cage. That kind of cancer presents with a stabbing pain in the chest, shortness of breath. Like with the other cancer, the lining of the lung is sort of squeezing the lung so you can't breathe as well. And the peritoneal cancer, the lining around the stomach, the little cellophane that protects your stomach from your other organs, that type of cancer presents with sharp stomach pains, with problems with bowels, things like that just aren't normal. And like I told you, the way they diagnose that is by x-ray and then by taking a tissue sample and having a pathologist look at it under a microscope and give you a definitive diagnosis, this is malignant.
And both the meso in the lungs and in the stomach, there is no cure?
There is no cure.
What treatments are being provided to try and reduce symptoms?
Same treatments that they have for lung cancer,
which is the chemotherapy,
radiation, chemotherapy. The chemotherapy, they have specific chemotherapy drugs that have been tested through experimental testing that have been shown to be somewhat effective. However, they're not a cure. The latest type of treatment that they're working on is a pneumonectomy, extrapleural pneumonectomy, where they remove the pleura and all the lung tissue.
All right, we're going to talk about how you litigate these cases on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, and Jeff Nicholson. We'll be right back.
Did you know that high-def programming from Cox is free? That's right. Cox gives you a ton of HD channels for no additional cost. Your favorite HD channels, your local channels in HD, and even more HD choices with On Demand, and more being added every day. So get a whole lot more HD for a whole lot less with Cox Digital Cable.
Legal Lines, I'm Locke Meredith. Jeff, we've talked about the various develops a treatment for those types of injuries. Let's talk about how these type of cases are litigated. Like we said before, you see tons of commercials about this being run by lawyers, different stuff. Maybe I don't know yet. And I come see you. What's going to happen?
The first step is to get the diagnosis. That's what starts the clock running for you.
So I'm probably going to need symptoms then.
Absolutely.
So if I just think I've been exposed to this stuff in the past, but I'm not exhibiting those symptoms that we've talked about in the previous segments, it's hard
to do something about it. So the clock starts ticking at that point.
So that lawyer better start moving.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what does he do?
The first step when a case comes in the door is to find out how you were exposed to the asbestos, whether it was through work, through family, through home improvements. You've got to find out where that exposure came from.
Why?
Because that determines who your defendants are in the case, who gets sued.
All right, and then so in addition to, I guess the employer, or if in fact you contracted it with your employer, you're going to sue the manufacturer of the product.
Right.
So who are the defendants typically?
Trade he was in. There's different manufacturers that manufacture those specific products.
And that's pretty much well known?
Sure. If you're a pipe fitter, we know you worked around pipe covering, we know you worked around gaskets, and each plant used different providers.
Information evidence is through what's called discovery, and you request production of documents and alternatives.
Right, and in an asbestos case, the number of people who expose any one person to asbestos lowers the number any one person's going to have to pay you. So if there's 20 defendants, it's better for each defendant than if there's one defendant.
So they all point the finger at themselves, want them in the litigation so they don't all have to eat the big pie.
Absolutely. A premises owner, the person who owns the plant, will produce documents showing that other people were in their plant because they want other people at the party.
They want them as a defendant to pay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
What court do you sue in? Do you sue in a state court or do you sue in federal court?
Most cases are sued upon in state court because there's a local defendant. When you have a person who lives in Louisiana, you need another person who lives in Louisiana on the other side of the lawsuit as the defendant, because if not, you're going to be in federal court. So in these cases, a lot of these suppliers were local people and are the people who keep us in state court for these cases.
And the reason that you would...
Well, in federal court, for one, there's a MDL, multi-district litigation, that handles the asbestos cases, and you're up in Philadelphia on those, and there's a stay on a lot of those. Some of them are moving right now, but for years there's been a general stay on it. And just about has 6 months to a year to live. You don't want to tell them that they've got 20 years to wait for a case to go through. You want to be able to tell them that you're moving their case as fast as possible.
All right. Now, as I understand it, also, a number of the defendants are bankrupt.
Correct.
Explain to the folks what that means.
Correct. In the early stages of the litigation, some of the biggest players in the litigation, Johns Manville, Owens Corning, Pittsburgh Corning, the people that manufactured a lot of these deadly products and had a lot of blame on them in the case, declare bankruptcy, and at this point have bankruptcy trusts set up that pay something to each claimant that presents a claim to the trust.
So in essence, they went to the bankruptcy court and said, we've got to limit our exposure, our businesses, we're going to lose our business, we're going to go out of business. And so the court allowed them to put millions of dollars into a fund that the court administers based on claims that come in.
Correct. The trust is something that they put some assets into and all their liabilities into, and they're clean.
They get to walk away.
Walked away clean from the asbestos litigation.
All right. So you also may sue the employer. Explain how you can sue the employer, because typically they would have a defense that, look, we're protected. All we have to pay is workers' compensation. We have no tort or personal injury liability.
In Louisiana, a person who worked in a plant and contracts mesothelioma is able to sue the employer if their exposure happened before 1975. In 1975, the legislature changed the workers' compensation law to include mesothelioma as a named disease under the Act. So any case where you were exposed in plants before 1975, you're able to sue your employer directly, unlike today when everything that you can think of is covered under the Act. Your only remedy today for any kind of illness or injury under the Workers' Compensation Act is under the Workers' Compensation Act.
Which is very limited benefits. So let's just restate that. So bottom line is, if your exposure, that is when you were working with the materials and you inhaled it, was prior to 1974, you will be able to sue your employer.
75.
Excuse me, 75. You'll be able to sue your employer and hopefully recover damages. However, if you're exposed at the time that you had handled it and inhaled it occurred after that date, then you're going to be limited to workers' compensation type benefits from your employer. You still may be able to sue the manufacturer for personal injury damages, but all you can get against your employer is workers' comp benefits.
Yeah, as the law stands right now, anything post 75, any kind of exposure after 75, you've got a case against distributors and manufacturers only.
The lawsuit, you do discovery and find out who the manufacturers are, who the employer is, and you've brought them as defendants. What do you next have to prove?
The next step is to prove exposure. That's done by talking to the person who was exposed or the person's co-workers and finding out what materials they recall being exposed to. The standard is that you disturb some kind of asbestos product and we're in the area breathing the fibers in from the disturbance. like we talked about, you know, asbestos tile sitting on the floor isn't dangerous. It's when it's broken or disturbed, sawed, grinded, whatever, that releases those fibers in the air. So you've got to prove that your person disturbed pipe covering or was in the area when it was being disturbed, to prove your case against the pipe covering manufacturer.
And typically the way you're going to do that is with the testimony of your client and perhaps any witnesses that were around at that time.
Yeah. Anybody that worked in the plant where this guy worked could tell you.
Now, there are no class actions permitted in this type of litigation.
Correct. The Supreme Court years ago ruled that this is